So thank you all so much for joining us for Archiving the Black Web, our introduction to web archiving. This is our first workshop this year. And today we will be chatting a bit about Intro to Web Archiving. But just to give you all an idea of what our agenda is, we will cover a range of topics today. We're going to share a little bit more about us, Archiving the Black Web, the initiatives that we have, also our upcoming events. We will also go over a brief history of the web archiving itself. Zakiya will walk us through ethics, and towards the end, we actually will have a live demo where we can web archive and show you some of the initiatives that we're working on. I want you all to please understand that in the midst of today's webinar, you will not leave as an expert web archivist. This is our introduction, and throughout the duration of the year, we will continue to have multiple workshops diving deeper into the topic of archiving the Black web. So to just give you all a background of who we are, if you are familiar with us, thank you so much for continuing to be in community with us. If you're just joining us, we are Archiving the Black Web. Our organization was founded by Burgess, Jules, and Makiba in 2019. Our primary goals are to empower folks, Black folks, on how to get access to training, learning how to become web archivists themselves. We develop a range of programs that support web archiving programs and at collecting institutions that document Black life. And we also support individual archivists, memory workers, and institutions around collection development. This is our team. These are the people behind Archiving the Black Web. Makiba Foster is our co-founder and administrative lead. Dr. Burgess Jules is our co-founder and program design and strategic lead. Zakiya is our program director. Myself, Camille Lawrence, is the web archivist. Dr. Meredith Clark is our research lead. Holly Smith is a project partner, and Derek Mosley is the project partner, as well as Yusuf Omowale is a project partner as well. But I just wanted to give a special shout out to Derek Mosley. Derek is now the 80th president of the Society of the American Archivists. So big ups to Derek, our project partner at Archiving the Black Web. Now, before we get into the webinar, would love to hear from you all in the chat. Where are you from? It is time for roll call. Please feel free to share your name if you're joining from a specific institution and where you are located in the world. We have folks in our team who are all across the US. But for us in developing more programming, we would love to know where you're joining us from. And for those of you who are familiar, in the midst of this webinar, we will be referencing the Black web a lot, especially memes and GIFs. And as you all see, these are viral aunties on the left who were referenced by Victoria Monet in her All My Mama music video. And so we are always seeing the ways in which the web influences art or how art imitates life on the web. Thank y'all so much for shouting off in the chat and for joining us from all across the US and multiple institutions. Now, just to share a little bit more about me, as I mentioned before, my name is Camille Lawrence. I'm an archivist, a web archivist, and a curator. My work really focuses on the art history, innovations, and diversity of artistic expression across the African diaspora. I really focus on archiving that through oracle, physical, and ritual preservation. And my projects include Black Beauty Archive and contributions to several other institutions. At the moment, I am the web archivist for Archiving the Black Web. I also am the program manager for Web Recorder, and I am still the steward over the Urban Bushwomen collection. Many archivists like myself, we start off in a background doing physical preservation or processing, and we've had the opportunity to step into web archiving. And so also shout out to Archiving the Black Web and the Shifts Collective, because I dub myself as one of the first graduates of their web archiving initiatives. I'm also an active member in several groups, including Black Memory Workers Group, Society of American Archivists, International Internet Preservation Consortium, and I am in the process of completing my master's in library science, and also a few other certifications. Now I'm going to pass this over to my colleague, Zakiya, who's going to share a bit more about Work School.
All right. Hi, everyone. So good to see all of you here and see all the names and places people are from and to see some familiar names as well. So this year we are launching our work school, which is Archiving the Black Web's training program to create a new generation of web archiving practitioners, especially those that are looking to document Black life online, Black memory workers, and those working at Black collecting institutions. And this program is informed by our cultural practices as Black memory workers and our ways of knowing. And this program is about to officially launch next month, beginning with an orientation at the end of April. And I see some folks that, they haven't been announced yet, but I see some of our work school participants here. But there will be an announcement very soon of our fellows and our faculty and teaching assistants. And work school is made up of 5 classes: a Black history of the web, intro to web archiving tools, building a web archive, and web archive practices. And if you all did not get a chance to apply this year, we will have another round. So, and hope to keep having rounds. So talk to your local funders. Yeah, we would love to have you continue to be a part of Archiving the Black Web in other formats. We also have some upcoming panels. First, beginning with a Black history of the web and archiving our existence, which will take place on Wednesday, April 30th at 11 a.m. And this will be a virtual panel featuring Dr. Sarah J. Jackson, Dr. Charlton McIlwain, Dr. Catherine Knightstill, Dr. Tanya Sutherland, and Cinnamon Love. And yeah, we'll hear more about sort of Black contributions to the web and, sort of how we can go about archiving those brilliant contributions. And then we also have another panel that evening, which if you are in the Atlanta area, this will be a hybrid event. So please do come through. You can use this QR code on your screen to register. For both events, you can use the QR code at Bitly's to register for both virtual and in person. And so this panel is titled Towards Realizing Safety for Black People on the Web, and really looks at sort of how we are creating safe spaces for ourselves in light of, recent changes online, and how we can continue to support ourselves through, building in certain technological affordances into platforms and sort of creating community the same way that we always do. So we hope that you will join us, and I will also drop the links to register here in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zakiya, for giving us updates on upcoming events. So before we actually step into what is web archiving and the ways in which that we do those processes, I just wanted to give us a brief history of the web, a brief history of the web.
This episode of Life Noggin was brought to you by Audible. In 1969, the first ever message was sent from one computer to another over the ARPANET, the government's computer network at the time. ARPANET stands for Advanced Research Projects Agency. One was located in a research lab in UCLA and the other at Stanford. All the message said was log in, and it didn't fail to crash the network. Stanford only received the first 2 letters of the message, but hey, you gotta start somewhere. By the end of the year, only 4 computers were connected to this network. In 1971, the University of Hawaii's Aloha Net was added, followed by various networks in London and Norway 2 years later. Also happening in 1971, Ray Tomlinson was developing the first system to send mail back and forth between the users of ARPANET. This would eventually be called electronic mail, or email for short. The @ symbol was used to tell a person's name and the host name apart. With all of the networks floating around, there needed to be a way for all of the computers on them to communicate with other networks. This is where computer scientist named Vinton Cerf comes in. He invented a way to introduce computers across the globe to each other in a virtual space. This invention was called Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP, which was followed by Internet Protocol, or IP. In the 80s, scientists used Cerf's protocol to send data back and forth, but the 90s is where it really all began. In 1991, a computer programmer named Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. This wasn't just a data sharing space for scientists anymore, this was an entire network of information that was accessible to anyone with an internet connection. Now, you're using a browser right now to watch this video, and some of the popular ones are Firefox, Google Chrome, and Safari, but in 1992, Urwise was created. Urwise was an internet browser and the first to have a graphical interface. A few browsers came before and after, but in 1993, Mosaic was created, and it would popularize surfing the web. Mosaic influenced many of the browsers to follow, including Netscape Navigator in 1994. This became the most popular web browser at the time, accounting for 90% of the web usage in 1995. In the early 90s, companies like AOL and CompuServe were starting to provide dial-up internet access. Dial-up is a method of connecting to the internet via a telephone line. Your telephone line was plugged into a modem, and the other end was plugged into the phone jack. There was a period in history where you couldn't use your telephone and the internet at the same time. Without the internet, we obviously wouldn't have things like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, but way more importantly, we wouldn't be able to access information in seconds. We wouldn't be able to communicate with people from around the world, share ideas, and educate those who might not get a chance elsewhere. Also, without the internet, I'd actually have to talk to someone when I order a pizza, which by
So I think it's just important in many times before we jump into technical workflows that we just get a refresher of the history of the internet. And I'm sure that you all have seen in this video, many names were mentioned, predominantly white men. And in a second, we will get to the names of Black folks in tech who have contributed greatly to innovations in technology that we utilize now on the web. So just a quick refresher, how does the World Wide Web work? This is a gorgeous diagram put together by one of our work school educators, Lorena Ramirez Lopez. And in this diagram, you will see that the World Wide Web is a collection of interlinked websites and other web resources. And client-server model shows that you as the user are sending messages via HTTPS. And within that is a network of information that pulls and retrieves the information that users like ourselves are able to visually view and navigate across the web. In this next slide, we're able to see some Black inventors in tech who have contributed greatly to many features that we use on the World Wide Web today. So Dr. Shirley Ann Jackson created fiber optic cables. James Edward West holds over 200 plus patents of microphones, not only used in mobile devices, but also laptops, desktops, and hearing aids. We have Mark Dean, who helped create the personal computer, color computer monitors, and the first gigahertz chips. Dr. Philip has also developed the world's fastest supercomputer, and Dr. Marianne Croak, I apologize for the typo, this woman here, created the voice over IP, network engineering, and voice over IP are features that allow us to speak to each other on the web through Zoom and additional video platforms. Now, for those of us, if there are millennials in the room and Gen Zs and everyone else, in the beginning, in the early 2000s, the internet looked very simple. We had primarily desktop and laptop access, and most web pages had simple HTML with very text-heavy designs, minimal images, and maybe a few advertisements. Shout out to anyone who was buying their first school books on Amazon and using AIM and also utilizing Ask Jeeves for schoolwork. Now, in the midst of the internet growing and developing, where more folks are having user access, we have a range of Black communities that are showing up on Black-owned platforms like Black Planet, but also non-Black platforms like MySpace and Tumblr and Twitter and Instagram and Triller. We continue to develop and create our communities within these communities, creating and setting viral trends, breaking world records, and creating more visibility to the range of Blackness in the diaspora. And so in the next few slides, we're going to go through some of the 2000s to really speak to some of those viral key moments where Black folks are really making waves and influence, not only online, but in a global space as well. So some viral moments that I think are really important to note is that in 2011, Beyonce announced her pregnancy and she set a Twitter record. There were over 8,000 tweets per second, and she is still noted as the individual who has the most tweets per second for a single event. In 2012, we see that GIFs and memes are born. On Giphy, this actually is one of the highest referenced GIFs. And in Black culture, although, you know, sometimes we laugh at our pain, this actually is a very serious moment, but it's important to know when GIFs are really booming on the scene and memes are being more present in social media. And in the world of e-commerce online, Rihanna breaks records in selling a lipstick at MAC Cosmetics that sold out online in 3 hours. Between 2014 and 2016, we really see the rise of the global Black influencer. This young woman, Peaches Monroe, I'm sure everyone has heard the term on fleek now. She created the term on fleek after leaving a beauty appointment or doing it herself. She did go viral online, and we hear because she did not trademark the term, that terminology was used in music, songs, commerce, retail, and has continued to be referenced today. Another young man named Nick Frazier goes viral online in 2015, and he starts to begin more parodies and ushers in a new type of influencer who can create parody and cover videos while dancing. And in 2016, we see Joanne the Scammer, who is introduced to the world and also shows how Black folks who are global influencers are blowing up, being viral, and showing parodies and different nuances across the culture. Now, from 2017 to 2019, we see an empowerment of Black women take over the web. We see the Me Too hashtag movement. Tarana Burke goes viral for raising awareness on SA and SW. In 2018, for the Super Bowl, Black Twitter deems that day as Janet Jackson Appreciation Day, giving reverence to her. And in 2019, again, Rihanna breaks records online, and she outperforms views and sales for women's lingerie for the Victoria's Secret fashion show, replacing them now with her brand Savage Fenty. As you all know, in 2020, we experienced a global pandemic. And during COVID-19, we all were in a disarray of sorts. We were on lockdown. We were very unsure. There were protests. There were attacks against Black life. But it did not stop us from gathering and being in community. And so it is noted that in 2020, social media engagement rapidly increased, with a global user base exceeding 4.1 billion. And in the midst of this, again, our communities are growing online, our visibility, our hashtags, and we're even creating our own platforms like Versus to keep us inspired and entertained in the midst of things that are ever evolving and ever changing. Now, in the midst of us understanding the Black global influence online, I think it's really important to quote one of our upcoming panelists, Dr. Charlton McIlwain. And he stated in a Verge interview in 2021 that everyone understands the value of Black culture and Black cultural products. But without the critical elements of ownership when it comes to Black creators, we really have to think more intentionally about how we find a way to create value in the sense that we can benefit as Black folks and individuals from the work that we're creating and the things that we trend and make go viral on the internet. And so in comparison to the early 2000s, now in 2025, we have extremely dynamic websites. We have mobile internet access across a wide range of devices, including tablets, cell phones, smart devices, Apple Watches, even gaming consoles. And the range of websites are way more dynamic, way more interactive. We have folks live streaming at any moment. We are consumers online, and we're even continuing education online as well. And so as we continue to contribute to the web and the web continues to grow and adapt every single day, we as web archivists and folks at Archiving the Black Web are constantly thinking about new methodologies and practices to capture so many dynamic elements that are always changing on the web. And so Zakiya is going to share a poll in our chat, and we'd love to know about what you are most interested in web archiving on the web. And so I'm going to just go ahead and set a short timer for 2 minutes, and everyone can share their responses. So we have about 85% of folks who've participated. We may not need the entire minute and 14 seconds, but we're just going to still give a few more folks time to respond. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. And we have about 49 folks who responded, 47 folks. Our poll results are 57% of you are interested in archiving websites, 28% are interested in archiving social media, 11% are interested in archiving videos online, and 4% are interested in archiving memes. Now, in the midst of understanding, we want to capture websites, social media, memes, videos. The question now is, how do we capture these ever-evolving dynamic elements on the Black web? And that answer is pretty simple, and it's the reason why we're here today. Through web archiving. Web archiving is a very unique process. It's been a technique and process that's been in development over the last 15, 20 years. And we're going to go through some key terms and definitions so that we can have a collective understanding about what web archiving is. So according to the IIPC, web archiving is the process of collecting portions of the World Wide Web and preserving those collections in an archival format, and then serving it for future access and use. And web archives themselves collect, preserve, and provide ongoing access to ephemeral web pages so that we can trace human thought, activity, and history. And I think two keywords I want us to remember here are archival formats and ephemeral. URLs and digital formats are very unstable, and so it is the job of web archivists in community with one another to continue to create new techniques, technologies to capture dynamic elements of the web. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm a web archivist. And for those who are not familiar with the term, our primary goal is to capture and preserve dynamic and functional aspects of web pages, including links, embedded media, videos, etc., and animation, while maintaining the context and the relationship of the files. And we're also thinking about future access and preservation so that these digital file formats are readable in the future. We are in constant relationship with developers who are helping create this technology, librarians, historians, curators, students, researchers, directors, a wide range of individuals we are in relationship with, training them to become web archivists, and also contributing to our workflows and giving us insight to the type of collections that we develop. Now, who is actually archiving the web outside of web archivists? We have artists, we have national libraries, we have universities, we have activists, we have graphic designers, researchers, marketing firms, librarians, research scientists, and so many more individuals. As we get into tools a little bit later, many people are able to locally, from their specific device, capture things on the web, and people also use browser-based systems. Web archivists, like traditional archivists, sometimes are working in silos. And so it's in recent years that we are in community with one another and in deeper conversations about how we support each other and how we support individuals who are not actively archiving the web. Now, just want to get a little bit more into digital file formats. So similar to archivists who work in physical preservation and may be preserving books and prints and textiles and photographs, web archivists are doing the same. The only point of difference is that we're working with digital file formats. So some of the file formats that we're dealing with include document files, image files, audio files, videos, and GIFs or GIFs, however you prefer to acknowledge that term. And as we use web archiving tools to capture the web, we normally are able to have an output of two types of file formats. And those two types of file formats are work files and waxy files. Both of these files are acknowledged by the Library of Congress as sustainable digital file formats, as in the way the file is developed. Hopefully, it is accessible for us to read in the future. Work files were created by the Internet Archive, and this format is an older format to help support the harvesting and access of archiving the web. And in recent years, in January 2021, Web Recorder created the WAXI file. The WAXI file was designed to create and host web archives quicker and easier, and it serves as a zipped package format. And so what WAXI files do is take the raw work files and zip them up to compress them to allow for a more quicker, seamless process and also an easier retrieval process when the web archiving is complete. We're going to walk through a glossary of some web archiving terms that we will be using regularly. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment to refresh my screen. And I'm going to share that again. But in the meantime, as I mentioned before, feel free to ask questions in the comments as we continue to go on, and what we haven't covered, we'll be sure to circle back to cover again. Okay, awesome. Perfect. So some of these terms that we use frequently are crawl, which is the process of collecting web content. Collections become the selection of archived items that we create around a certain subject or theme. Crawl workflows, which we'll see in a bit, is the configuration that we instruct a crawler to do while we're capturing different URLs across the internet. Curators are individuals who help us build collections, or sometimes web archivists serve as curators, and repositories are the backup storage locations that preserve copies of these archived items. You'll also hear terms often like scope. Scope sometimes informs our web archiving policies, but also the crawler itself. But in this perspective, the scope is the outline of what the archive contains, subject matter, themes, etc. Which you'll see in a minute. We give the crawler an extracted seed to capture URLs. We also utilize quality assurance tools and features to understand a better process of determining the quality of an archived item, how legitimate it is. And we also capture URLs, which is a uniform resource locator. And the web archive essentially is a collection of web published materials curated for evaluation and access. Additional terms as well are web crawlers. That's the actual program that browses the web to collect data. And as we mentioned before, we have two types of file formats when web archiving, which are WAXI files and work files. Now, just to share a little bit more about different types of user groups and why they would be archiving the web. So, for example, a librarian at a university may be capturing weekly crawls of the university website, student courses, events, social media presence, etc., to preserve in the library so that the institution has a digital record of its digital presence and website. Whereas a journalist may be capturing weekly crawls of news proceedings, publications online, articles, interviews, and top stories to save for their own institutional work. Marketing directors, there are new laws that are changing across the US where marketing firms are required to have audits at the end of the year about their digital presence. And so we also support marketing directors in capturing monthly crawls of their websites, their social media presence, and their online campaigns. I think it's also important to note that creatives, not only photographers, but graphic designers, maybe even makeup artists and hairstylists, are capturing weekly crawls of their websites, so of their work that's published, where they're being seen in the world, and their online campaigns. And students as well are learning alongside professors or working individually to capture daily crawls of websites that are of interest community forums online, maybe Twitter threads, and social media as well. So I do want to affirm that web archiving is very accessible, and there are different user groups who are actively web archiving, but there is so much potential and opportunity for us to connect deeper with creatives and memory workers and traditional folks who are not traditionally in institutions. And so at this moment, we're going to drop another poll in the chat to learn a little bit more about what is your personal experience with web archiving. And so I'm going to give folks 2 minutes to answer these questions as well. Thank you all so much for engaging in the conversation and the polls. It's really helpful to us as we continue to develop programming. And we have about 43 folks who responded out of 50. We'll just give another minute to allow additional folks to respond. All right, we have about 90% of folks who have responded. So at this moment, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and we'll talk a bit more about the results. So 33% of you have shared that you are a novice, you have never web archived before. 33% identified as being beginners. We have about 22% of folks in the room as competent who have a general understanding of web archiving. We have 9% who are proficient and 2% that are experts. So to the folks who are competent, proficient, and experts in today's webinar, we thank you for being with us in community and ask that you just give extra grace for the individuals who we're speaking to who have never web archived before. And so, because this is Archiving the Black Web and we are Black individuals, we are going to be very honest and very Black. So wanted to share a little bit more about the brief history of the web. Okay, thank you, timer. I don't need you anymore. So we've already gone through a brief history of the web. We've shared a little bit more about web archivists and other folks who are web archiving in the world. We've shared more about frequently used web archiving terms, but we have not discussed frequently used terminology in our communities. So for the Black folks in the room, I'm talking to you. So let's get into some of these frequently used terms. So in social media, online, on digital platforms, we are often seeing some terminology used as professionals that folks in our community are remixing and reworking to best fit their needs, which I totally understand. But in our initiative in Archiving the Black Web to advocate and empower more folks to get into web archiving, we do need to have a refresh and a reset on what these terms actually mean. So oftentimes folks are using the term archive. The technical definition is a collection of historical documents and records providing information about a place, keyword historical documents and records, right? But many of us online are creating digital media galleries and calling them archives. So for example, if you have an album on Google Photos that you've shared, or if you've even created something on Google Arts and Culture, some folks will look at that as an archive or a digital archive or social media accounts. I'm not saying that it's not that. It's a step towards formalizing what your collection of digital assets can be. Another term that we're seeing used frequently in Black communities across the web is digital archiving. So the technical definition of it is the process of preserving and managing digital information for long-term storage and accessibility. I think the keywords here are ensuring its integrity and future retrieval. So what we're actually doing sometimes in our communities is just storing digital media content in a multi-tenant cloud storage. So for example, if you're digitizing photographs and you put them in Google Drive, that's not technically digital archiving. That process is called digitization. Just because you take a physical file format and now it's digital, it's not born digital, it's been digitized, there are still many steps that have to be taken afterwards to ensure the integrity of that file and its long-term access and retrieval. So I just want to affirm that many of us are saying we're digital archiving, but what we're really doing is digitizing and storing that into cloud systems. And the last term that we're seeing often too is web archiving. As we all know, we're learning today, web archiving is the process of collecting and preserving websites, again, long-term access and use, and we're using technology that is designed to capture web content. Whereas many folks in our communities are taking screenshots, screen recordings, downloading PDFs, and saving it into folders, which some folks may identify as web archiving, but what you're doing is just saving a digital file of the copy. And it is one of many steps that you can take to learn how to web archive accurately with integrity, again, to ensure that you are preserving the websites for future use. I wouldn't be me if I didn't include some gifts. And so in regards to, I want to let you all know that screenshots, PDFs of URLs and GIFs does not equal web archiving. And who said that? Many of us are saying it on the web. So just want to affirm that screenshots are not web archiving. You are taking a screenshot of a digital file and saving it. And again, want to just remind you all that digitization does not equal digital preservation. It is one step, but it's not the end all be all. And so in the words of someone who's always going viral online and has a huge digital presence on the Black web, Miss Lenethia Leaks, I said what I said. Digitization is not digital preservation, but you are on the right path to take steps towards learning about digital preservation. Digital preservation is a very intense workflow and would love to share more about that in future workshops. So at this moment, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Zakiya. Zakiya is going to share more with us about ethics when we approach web archiving.
All right, thanks, Camille. All right, next slide, please. All right, so in talking about ethics, yeah, it's one thing to think about. It's important for us to think about sort of the power that comes with archiving, whether that's digital archiving, web archiving, traditional archiving, oral histories, all of the archives and their children. And other iterations all require us to think about ethics and to think about power, and the power that is in deciding that something is worth collecting or worth documenting. And so to use the words of Mimi Onawa, who is a researcher, an artist, who has an exhibition called On Missing Data Sets, or has a exhibition called The Library of Missing Data Sets? I think so. And has this quote: "To collect, record, and archive aspects of the world is an intentional act, one that typically benefits those who have the power to decide what should be collected." And, you know, this just sort of exemplifies sort of where we should be thinking about like what we are actually collecting and what are the reasons that we are determining that this particular website needs to be preserved, you know, long term, thinking about you know, what message does that send when we decide to preserve a particular website, and thinking about all the implications of, you know, what is to come with that web archive that is made available. So yes, just thinking about the power that we hold every time that we decide to preserve something. And in that power, thinking about, you know, sort of what are the long-term effects and what is our long-term stewardship plan when we web archived it that one time? Like, what are we, you know, yes, it's preserved, but it's not set it and forget it. It still requires long-term attention and maintenance, and really thinking about the impact of the individuals that may be included in a particular web archive. Next slide, please. All right, so thinking through some ethical challenges, and many of these are sort of developed out of Archiving the Black Web's sister community, I guess you can call it, documenting the now, or Doc Now, which focuses on ethical social media archiving and documentation. And it is a community and that focuses on sort of the ethics overall of what is involved in social media documentation, but it also extends to web archiving largely. So thinking about sort of some of the challenges we have is, there can often be a lack of consent because we may find a website online that we're interested in, and we know that this is something that should last well on into the future. But the creators of that content may not have contact information available. They may not name themselves anywhere on the website. Maybe you came across, a profile or a tweet, or you archived an entire set of tweets. And, the way social media works, you have a post, you have comments, you have likes. There are so many people that are entangled in a single moment in time online. But even when it's just one person, it can be really difficult to obtain consent from that person to, maybe this website is meant to be around for a good time and not a long time. But if someone decides to preserve it, then it's here for a long time. And so just, being aware of consent practices and where we can implement them. Many institutions have consent practices that may include, trying to find the content creator and reach out to them and get permission to web archive their content. And, sort of if they don't get permission, maybe having a second attempt, but after that, maybe going forth with the web archiving, and then just having a takedown policy if someone has their content web archived and they don't want it made available, that the content creator always has permission to do that. And so we try our best to seek consent, when we can, and also think about like sort of the data that we are collecting when we archive a website, and that, because we're all entangled, there's so many things that could be going on in that one moment. And, we don't know if the person who we web archive their page, we don't know if they got consent from the people whose photographs they use. Like there's so many different practices there. And it's, similar to maybe something we could see in, sort of in the analog world where you may collect a poster or a flyer from an event, but it's assumed that that is something like you can take home and like include as a part of your archive going forward, even though there may be a photo of someone on the physical flyer, but you want to document like your presence at that event. And maybe, there's someone who actually designed that flyer whose name is not listed there and you didn't get their permission, you didn't, so we have like sort of an analog version of this that we kind of contend with or don't contend with. We just take the flyer home and we don't say anything else about it. It's like, okay, well, and so, but because we're online and, things are public, but not necessarily meant for everyone's consumption, it's something we have to think about. And we also have to think about, how we make their information available. So a blog may have had an audience of 50, but if you post it on your institutional or project website, which has a following of 10,000, you've now platformed something that was maybe intended to have a smaller audience. And so it's important to think about having consent practices or statements that at least explain your ethics around why you may have decided to web archive certain things. And in that, it's sort of important to think about the potential misuses and the potential harms that could come to anyone who is featured in something that you are web archiving. Because we are archiving the Black web and we're talking about, Black people being in content, being content creators, we know that there is surveillance on Black people, on Black life. We know that things that sometimes happen to us are not particularly legal. We know that there are things that we may do that are ethical and maybe not legal. And we don't want to put someone in harm's way when we know the justice system doesn't always work in our favor or ever. But, so just thinking about the potential harm that you may be bringing to people that are featured, that doesn't mean like you can't web archive anything, but just taking time to slow down the process. It's like this website could disappear. These websites are ephemeral, but taking the time to be a good steward and thinking about the impact. And that may mean, going down a rabbit hole of like, this isn't really possible in this moment, but as we've seen, our world can shift tremendously in a matter of 2 months. Of course, my doorbell is ringing at this moment. Hold. Okay, hopefully that's the end of that. So yeah, we see that the world can change in a minute, and your legal status can change, your actions that were once, acceptable can become unacceptable. So really having to kind of think about that and having a plan for, maybe removing access when conditions change, and just sort of being aware of that. And lastly, just thinking about, you know, in web archiving, we are using data just like we use data for anything else when we save something in the cloud, when we're using, Wi-Fi, when we're, anything that we're doing is using data. And so it's not, even though we don't see the physical places that, web archived material ends up because it's in cloud storage, that doesn't mean that we can just kind of like web archive everything loosey-goosey and like, take up lots of data in doing that. But really, encouraging folks to have sort of an appraisal process where they actually think about, do I need to web archive this entire website, or am I just interested in one page on this website? Do I need to archive someone's entire Twitter history, or am I just interested in this particular set of tweets? Am I trying to archive all of Twitter, which Library of Congress tried, didn't work, so don't try, won't work. But or can I just think carefully about what it is I actually am trying to document here? Is it a specific behavior? Is it a specific event? Is it, how, people are responding to one person's, tweet or, Blue Sky post or Instagram post. So really considering what your focus is and honing in on that rather than, feeling the pressure of like the ephemerality of the internet to like document everything. And I'll leave it there, but there's a lot more to consider, but yeah, we'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Zakiya, for giving us a deeper dive to think intentionally about what we're capturing on the web and how we even approach that process and workflow while trying our best to protect folks who are captured in those crawls. And so we want to ask an open-ended question to everyone in the chat. Why should we archive the Black web? Would love to hear some of your thoughts, ideas, feelings around this question. I'll give everybody a minute to answer and share some of their thoughts in the chat. Why should we archive the Black web? I'm going to give you all a few more moments to respond. Love this. Love some of your responses. Yes, absolutely, 100% agreeing. And folks can continue to share throughout the duration of the 30 minutes we have left. But I'm just going to share personally some of my feelings of why we should be archiving the Black web. Because Black folks across the African diaspora should have access and agency to preserve our history online and our contributions. We all know that URLs and digital assets are unstable file formats. We also want to be able to combat misinformation, erasure, and/or misrepresentation of Black folks on the web. Our communities, as you all have seen, are always creating new viral trends that shape and influence global culture, keyword global. We want to continue to build and create archives of cultural and historical contributions to Black culture and society at large. And long story short, because there are Black folks in the future, and we want to ensure that our experiences, our history, and our collective contributions are accessible to those individuals in the future. Also, want to shout out some folks in the chat who are saying a lot of important things: historical evidence, achieving girl genius, overall to educate, yes. Combating erasure, yes. Documenting that we are here, yes. And we have learned quickly in working in archives, sometimes if you are not present in the room to preserve your stories, your story may be forgotten, or as we've seen in recent months, erased from the web. But we're going to get into some workflows now, where we can share a little bit more how we can all be good stewards and be more empowered to capture the web. I do want to give us a 5-minute break because this is an hour and 30-minute long webinar, which sometimes is a little longer than usual. So I'm going to go ahead and reset this timer for 5 minutes. You all can stop for a break to grab some water. And when we come back, we'll finally getting to the actual process of web archiving. So thank you all again for being with us in community. And we will see you when this timer is complete. All right, everyone, we have about 30 more seconds. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, again for your patience and joining us and being in community with us today. Perfect. All right, so our break is done, and we are now finally going to get into web archiving. So we are going to utilize some tools today created by Web Recorder. We are going to be using the platform called Browsertrix, which is a browser-based web archiving service. But I do want to let you all know that there are free web archiving tools that are accessible that you can utilize. So there is a Google Chrome browser extension called Archive Web Page that allows users to manually create high-fidelity web archives. When you open up and install this browser extension, you will see this pop-up window, and you will have to select Start Archiving to begin manually scrolling through the page to capture the content that you're interested in viewing. Once you are done archiving the multiple pages that you enjoy creating, you can then download those files to your local devices, and you can load those web archives into Replay web page to easily view and review your manually captured crawls. So just want to affirm, this is a free browser extension where you can manually crawl websites yourself and click on links. But today we're going to jump into Browsertrix. Just to give a little bit background of Web Recorder builds tools to specialize in a user-driven form of web archiving. Their goal is to build quality open source tools that enable web archiving for all, allowing anyone with a browser to create their own web archives and to accurately replay them at a later time. The primary goal of Web Recorder is to create high quality, accurate capture and replay. There is a wide range of tools, but today we will be focused on Browsertrix in our demo. And just a little bit more about Browsertrix. Browsertrix is a high-fidelity crawling, innovative, quality assurance, and collaborative platform that allows you to preserve, curate, and share web archived content online with confidence. And so with this platform, you are able to watch crawls as they happen. You can create interactive copies of any website, and you can even capture information that is behind paywalls that require logins. And every single crawl and archived item that is a WAXI file is signed, sealed, and authenticated with its own unique crawl ID to affirm and ensure that the integrity of the web archive capture is legitimate. And so I'm going to stop sharing this presentation because I'm going to jump into my browser and we're going to actually start web archiving. So give me one moment. I'm going to pull up my Google Chrome browser and I'm going to log into Browsertrix. With Browsertrix, if you have the window idle for too long, it will log you out for safety. So thanks for your patience. Okay, awesome. So when you log into Browsertrix, you can log in from the website where you would select sign in. Once I entered my sign in credentials, I was able to then navigate to our dashboard. And so inside of our dashboard, we'll be able to see our storage usage. If we have any automated crawls that we're scheduled to capture at the time, if we have any collections, we're going to create a collection today. And you also have this new feature where you can create public-facing collections and continue to add to them as you go on. For this demo, I'm going to go ahead and select our website, Archiving the Black Web, and I'm going to go to the home page. I'm going to go ahead and copy this entire URL. And I just want to remind folks that when I personally am web archiving, I'm approaching the Browsertrix tool at step 5 of 10 instead of step 1. So essentially, just to affirm, steps 1 through 5 can be gathering a list of URLs, getting consent from individuals if you're capturing something that contains a lot of intellectual property that is not yours, updating your workflow list in a spreadsheet to confirm these are the crawls you want to capture, And now at step 5, I'm entering the tool. So I've gotten the consent from the Archive in the Black Web team that I can capture this website. And so in the tool, I'm going to go ahead and create what we call a new crawl workflow. For those of us who are brand new to web archiving, let's think about the crawl workflow as a recipe, right? A recipe has different levels of specification that you're going to input, but the output of that is a completed dish, which we'll refer to as an archived item. And so that analogy sometimes helps people who are new to web archiving get a better understanding of how we are navigating Browsertrix. Now, when you're creating a crawl workflow, you have a lot of the same levels of configuration for your scope and your crawl limits, which we'll get into in a second. But for now, we're going to start with the scope. As you create your crawl workflow, there is also a setup guide, a user guide here that gives you key definitions and understandings of what terminology you're looking at as you continue to create your crawl configuration. And so for this crawl, I want to just go ahead and capture everything on the domain of the Archive in the Black Web website. I want to capture everything on that same domain. When it comes to max depth and scope, I'm going to leave this as it is. If I knew, for example, there was a calendar invite or an event that had expired that I wanted to omit from this page, I could insert that URL here. Otherwise, I would go ahead and leave that empty for exclude pages. Crawl limits are normally defined for us to control to limit the size and the duration of the crawl. So if I know this website is 500 pages, I only want to capture 250. I have the ability to do so here, but because it is my intention to capture the entire domain of Archive in the Black Web, I'm going to go ahead and leave that as it is. There's also no crawl time limit, and I'm not prohibiting the crawl size as well. There are new features about crawling and page behaviors. So naturally, the crawler, which is the tool that's going to automatically move through these websites, is always on auto scroll. And when it comes to page timing, this is important for us to consider when we are capturing websites with very dynamic elements that may have videos or social media. Naturally, it is set as 120 seconds, but say if you were capturing social media, those videos and clips are wide ranging. And so that's why, again, affirming when you're coming into this web archiving tool, it should be step 5 instead of 1, because steps 1 through 4, you would have created a spreadsheet, you would have organized all of your videos that are around the same time frame to be captured together. And so you would have to be intentional about your workflow to ensure that you increase this page load timeout to allow the crawler to sit and wait for the page to load to capture all of that important content. Our website, Archive in the Black Web, doesn't have too many interactive elements, so we don't need to utilize that for today. Browser settings, which are browser profiles, which I'll get into in a minute, allow us to manipulate the browser settings in the crawl. So for this demo, I want to watch the crawler in 8 different windows move through our website. We don't have any ads on our website, but if we did, we could block the ads by domain. Our website is in English, so we're going to go ahead and leave it as such. But if we were capturing a website in another language, we can select from this list. And afterwards, when we replay the archived item of that website, we will be able to search in the keywords of the actual specified language. We are not crawling anything behind a paywall right now or a login, but if we were, you can select your browser profile with your login credentials that you've saved, and that would allow you to bypass the login. Scheduling, we are not running this crawl on a recurring basis, but if this crawl is amazing and I love it and I want to set it for a weekly frequency, I can do so, a daily frequency, and a monthly frequency. Please note though, if you're using Browsertrix, when you do set a recurring crawl, you just need to go back and update the name because the crawl name will update to copy 1, copy 2, etc. This is a demo, so we're not going to schedule it to crawl on a recurring basis. And metadata, my favorite part, we get to describe the crawl. So what is the name of this crawl? This is the Archive in the Black Web website. The description is I'm capturing this website for this webinar. If I want to add a tag, I definitely can. I can add a hashtag of website. I can add a hashtag of Archive in the Black Web. And Archive in the Black Web. Wonderful. And if I had a collection that I know I wanted to add this to, I would be able to do so. we can go ahead and review all of our settings, and we can select Run Crawl. Now, when we're selecting Run Crawl, this is taking us to the crawler page. This is also on the same platform. So what we're seeing now is the crawlers are going to spin up in the background, and we're going to be able to see the ways in which Browsertrix is able to automatically crawl multiple websites. Browsertrix allows multi-user access. So if I was crawling alongside Zakiya, my name is attached to all of the crawls that I'm launching and facilitating. The status of the crawl will continue to update. The size will update, and the size and scope, etc. Now, in our crawler settings, in our crawl workflow, remember I selected 8 browser windows because I wanted to be extra. And I wanted to see 8 windows working at one time to allow me to see how the crawl is happening. And so for first-time folks who are web archiving, this part is maybe the most exciting because you get to see the automated crawler go through and browse through these websites in their entirety. Now, another great feature is if there are error logs, aka if there are broken URLs on your site, they will appear here, which is great. You can share that with your developer team or graphic design team. And beneath every single crawl, you will have a list of queued up URLs that are next to be captured. If you realize, oh no, I want to exclude something, no problem. You can type in that exclusion here. I'm not going to exclude it, but you do have the ability to do so to exclude the page. And as you can see, we only have one more URL left to capture. It's told us that there's 48 pages, and the status is going to go ahead to change from running to completing to creating the Waxy file. Oh, it's complete. We didn't even have to wait. And so at this point, what we'll be able to do is we can replay this crawl. Now, replay allows us to view the archived item of the crawl that we've completed. So I just want to affirm to everyone who is new to web archiving, what we are viewing now together is the replay of the actual archived website. We are not looking at the live website. So we can go ahead and select different links, right? Because I selected a domain crawl, which means I wanted every single page to be captured on this website. And you can go ahead and navigate through your crawl. When you're in the replay feature, you do have the opportunity to type in keywords that may appear within the archived item. And when you're searching for those keywords, it will appear and bring you to that URL that was captured. And I'll just try another word, archive. And you'll see what pages are available with those keywords. Now, once you're done navigating through this, you would like to say, well, I want to download these files. Within Browsertrix, all of your crawls are saved here. But if you want to download them, you can go ahead and download them as a single Waxy or a multi-Waxy file. Again, if there's any error logs, you can view that here. And you can absolutely review your crawl settings to affirm that the levels of specification you made were great. And if we wanted to go ahead and copy this workflow ID to share with one of our colleagues, they can easily take the workflow ID and view it. And if we wanted to, we could also run a quality assurance analysis. So I'm just going to go ahead and run it. The quality analysis, the quality assurance within Browsertrix is comparing the archived item to the images that are happening in the crawler. So this quality assurance compares screenshots in the crawl to the completed crawl. It's not comparing the live website to the completed crawl, but essentially those captures are from the live site. While we're letting QA run, I'm going to navigate back to my dashboard. As you'll see, the amount of pages that I captured increased, and I don't have any crawls that are actively running. From the dashboard, I can see my crawl workflows. These are all of the different workflows of what I've decided to capture. And you cannot delete a crawl workflow in this platform. You can always review it, which I think is great to see, to review. You can also sort them by the crawl start URL or the crawl name in alphabetical order. And as I mentioned before, this is a collaborative platform. So whomever is working alongside you, their names will be attached to crawls. All of our archived items live here. As you see, we are running a QA analysis, but this archived item is complete. And if you select your archived item, it'll take you back to that page we just reviewed. And there's a little bit more in depth in the overview about the length of time it took, who initiated it. And as I mentioned before, every single crawl is signed, sealed, and authenticated. So you can copy and share those IDs with each other. Now we're going to talk a bit about collections. I have gone ahead and web archived a few different websites, and at this point, I want to share it with you all and my colleagues. So to create a new collection, it's as easy as selecting this button, New Collection. I'm going to name it Archiving the Black Web Webinar. Now, naturally, all of the collections in Browsertrix are listed as private, but I'm going to go ahead and select it as unlisted so I can share with you all. And it's as simple as adding an archived item. And so as you can see, the date that this was created was right now. And it will also naturally update as you add new crawls or modify this collection. So to select and add your archived items, once you select that, it's going to bring you to all of your workflows. And you can drop down these bars to select the type of crawls you want to add. So I want to add everything from the Archiving the Black Web website. We also had a feature at the College of Worcester as well, Urban Libraries Council. And I'm going to go ahead and select a recent Twitter crawl that I facilitated. Once I save that selection, these are all of the materials, and there's a total of 52 pages in my collection. And when I select this replay tool, it's going to allow me to look at all of the crawls that I facilitated. Let me go ahead and update my archived items. Save this selection. And now I'm going to go ahead and share this all with you. Actions. We just added there's some new updates too as well. So if you want to create a public page, you can do that here. But there are different levels of sharing this web archive. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the URL. This is the view, start page of a single snapshot. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second because we're at the 4:24 mark. As we mentioned before, this is intro to web archiving, and there's a lot of questions in the chat. So I do want to hold space for the last 5 minutes, if that's okay with you, Zakiya, and our team, to answer some folks' questions so it's not unanswered. Here we go. I'm going to start with the most recent question. Does Archiving the Black Web have any lists? So yes, we're in the midst of developing our web archiving policies in our larger community at large for folks to have an opportunity to contribute to our web archiving initiatives and to add URLs that they give us consent to capture. Thank you everyone for taking time to be with us. If you have a recurring crawl for a website set up, do you have to regularly review the website to account for media? I would say yes. If it's, a dynamic website that is ever changing on a weekly basis or like social media that's changing by the minute, yes, I would encourage you 100% to do so. Absolutely, yes. And is there a recommendation for a frequency when reviewing? Naturally, like I said, my workflow is approaching Browsertrix at step 5. So what I would have done already before I come into the tool at that scheduled recurring time to review the crawl, I would go ahead and look at those URLs to make sure that nothing has changed so that I can jump in and adjust the crawl frequency. What's the difference between doing a crawl of a website versus backing it up? Backing it up, why is crawl versus traditional backup? I would say yes, and there's different methodologies. So in full transparency, I'm not a developer, nor am I a tech whiz. I am an archivist who became a web archivist. So there are many times where we come across site maps or different levels of media that we want to capture, where we're collaborating with developers or experts who have been web archiving for 20+ years to encourage us in the best practices to capture the information that we need. Are there metadata frameworks for archived websites? There are suggested metadata frameworks, but I also want to encourage you that you do have agency to add different levels of metadata to your crawls that are most relevant to your collections and scopes, Anita. So you do have agency to do so. I am going to share my screen because I have a resource list that we can reference, and some of those resources are from the Library of Congress, the International Internet Preservation Consortium, or feel free to go ahead, jump in.
I was going to say, in terms of metadata, in the comments, I also shared a report with recommendations from OCLC on descriptive metadata practices for web archiving specifically. So that is also in the chat.
Thank you, Zakiya. I'm going to go ahead and drop some links in the chat from the Library of Congress, from the International Internet Preservation Consortium, and also from the Digital Preservation Handbook. My apologies that we didn't get to go deeper into web archiving, but I'm glad we were able to get a better understanding of the history of the web, our initiatives. This is the first of many workshops. And so after this workshop is complete, we'll send a recap email sharing the virtual webinar, but we may also attach a poll. We would love to hear your feedback about what are the things that you're interested in archiving in the future. So that can include social media. We can take a deeper dive into that. It could be websites. Maybe you want to learn more about consent. Whatever it is, please sound off in your response email when we share this recorded webinar to help us better curate programming to support your crawling needs at your institutions and as individuals. I just want to hold space for everyone to share. Oh, thank you so much, everyone, in the comments. Yeah, we're definitely going to keep holding space to come together in community. And if you'd like, before we exit, you can just answer this short poll to give us a little bit of insight about what would you like us to discuss next or in the next few months in our roadmap. I'm going to give you all 60 seconds to respond. And in the meantime, I'm going to drop some resources in the chat.
And I'll just say, Camille, I think the only question we didn't get to, and I'm not sure if the person is even still here, is do you recommend saving WAX-Z files in cloud storage?
I would recommend if you're using a platform like Browsertrix, because that's where the waxy files are, you can definitely save it in the cloud. I do recommend and support individuals to export those crawls into your local device, to back them up on external hard drives. And if there is an existing repository that you use, you can back it up there like ArchiveSpace or Preservica. If there are different repositories that you're looking to utilize, there's a huge community online. There's a big community on GitHub and a Web Recorder forum where folks are constantly talking and sharing about the selected repositories that they like to back up their web archives in. I'm going to give Marshana option to share your question. Do you want to drop it in the chat? Because we're at the 4:30 mark. And just wanted to share, everyone's really interested in Black digital collections and archiving social media. So that may be our next step. John, you have a question. Is there a right place to request access and sharing rights to archived websites? There are multiple approaches to doing that. What I will say is it's important enough that we can cover it in an upcoming webinar. So please stay connected with us because it's a subject matter that we'll really take a deep dive and get into. And Marshawn, I just want to give you an opportunity to throw your question in the chat before everyone leaves at 4:30 because we're at the mark. Thank you, everyone who's leaving at this moment.
I might be able to type it fast enough.
Okay, sure. Say it. Say it. Say it.
Yeah, are there any like projects that you know about where we could contribute to doing web archiving like for free? Like I know Library of Congress has like the transcription projects. Are there any web archiving related projects?
So at Archiving the Black Web, as I briefly mentioned, we are developing a robust collection policy, and that will include giving opportunity for folks to donate and contribute to our web archiving initiatives. So as I mentioned before, when we send this recap email, you have an opportunity to share feedback about how you'd like to support and contribute. And please stay connected with us online because those are in the upcoming conversations. But we are at 4:31. I just want to give everyone just thank you so much for joining us. We are going to continue to do the good work. We hope that you stay in community with us and keep your eyes open for our recap email that'll go out this week. That will include this recorded webinar, considering your questions, and we'll also share the links to what we web archived today. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a really beautiful week, and we'll continue to stay creating content that is relevant to archiving the Black Web.